Welcome to the Edge of Greatness podcast. The path to greatness is never linear and requires patience and consistency. Join us on our journey as we peel back the layers of success, searching for that elusive core. Each week we will explore a different component of greatness, utilizing experts who have traveled some part of the path that we are all on. We aim to uncover insights into the areas of leadership, coaching, performance, overcoming failure, the power of habits, and so much more. We are all on the edge of greatness. Hello and welcome back to the Edge of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Charles Schultz, and today I have with me a very special guest, president of Youngstown State University, former Youngstown State and Ohio State football coach, five-time national champion, Jim Tressel. Coach Tressel, thank you so much for taking time to join me today. It's an honor.
My pleasure, Charles.
So,
good to be with a good Penguin.
Yeah, absolutely. YSU through and through. So right. When I think of Coach Tressel, I think of coaching at the highest level, leadership, championship culture, and ultimately the sweater vest. And I have to ask, does the sweater vest make an appearance on the YSU campus ever, or have you hung that up and retired it?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm a sweater vest guy. Not when it's 85 degrees like today.
No, not today.
No, there's no doubt. When I first went to Ohio State, they asked me, what are you going to wear on the sideline? And I said, I don't know. What do you want me to wear? And they said, what did you wear at Youngstown State? And I said, well, we had a lot of night games, and even early in the year it was chilly at night, and so I said I used to wear a sweater vest, and so Nike then said, okay, well, you're going to wear a sweater vest at Ohio State. I said, well, whatever. Well, then of course my first game was like 12 noon, 90 degrees. They're sweating, and I'm thinking people are going to think I'm crazy wearing a sweater vest out here, but sometimes you don't have any say in the issue.
Yeah. So I need to know what were your thoughts when you first saw yourself as a Halloween costume?
It was humbling for sure. And, in fact, I just got a text the other day of a guy teasing me that someone in his son's class, they were doing a thing about famous Ohioans, and he went in and wore a sweater vest and this and that. And so I told the fella, I said, you need to tell him he needs to set his standard of famous a little higher than that. But it's obviously humbling when those things happen.
No, yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's kind of cool too, to think like the generations coming up are still looking to what you did when your time here and your time at Youngstown. That's awesome.
I'm sure they were wondering if I was still alive.
Oh, I don't think you've been gone that long. So what I want to know now is I follow you on Twitter, and I've actually been listening to your book recently, and you mentioned the idea of quiet time, and something kind of clicked with that. And I'm curious, can you tell me more about what is quiet time?
Yeah, quiet time was something that we began here at Youngstown State early on. That we knew that our players, and like when you played baseball here all day long, you were in class, and you were at that stage of life. You had your social side of things, and you were trying to grow and mature. And so then you get to practice at, 1:30, 2:00 in the afternoon, and you've already been flying around. And so we began a tradition of beginning our time together before practice in quiet time so that we could clear our minds and, start focusing in on what we had to do. And obviously the classes were important and your personal life was important, but really for the next 2 hours, we had to focus in on what we needed to accomplish. And so we began a tradition of quiet time where there was only really a couple mandatory parts of it. One was you had to be quiet, which was a good start for a college person. And the second thing is that in our winner's manual, which we had kind of a format built, that you had to write down one thing as we began quiet time that you were grateful for, because we wanted to constantly remind ourselves of the blessings that we have and the responsibility as a student athlete and as a representative of the university, and that you had to write down one thing that you were grateful for, and then you had to spend some time just getting your mind right. It's a distracting world, and nowadays it's 10 times more distracting. That was back when we didn't have cell phones and didn't have Twitter and we didn't have, texting, and we didn't have constant communication, but it was still a distracting moment in your life. And so, that became our tradition at Youngstown State, and we did the same at Ohio State. And after we left Ohio State, I would hear from a lot of the guys saying, "Hey, coach, I still do my quiet time. I do it to begin the day, which is when I do my quiet time, just to begin the day right, just to have my mind right going into the reality that there'll be a lot of distractions, there'll be a lot of ups and downs in all of our days." And they said, "Coach, we got to figure out a way to keep doing quiet time." And we went back and forth, and we decided that, you know what, why don't we just start a Twitter account and, pass the word to the guys that we'll give them one thought to begin their morning, and then encourage them to have their own quiet time and their own thoughts about gratitude and the things that we used to always talk about. And so we began every day just, putting a post, and it's been kind of fun to watch it grow, because we've got, I don't know, 185,000 or whatever. I don't know how many of them go in daily to get quiet time, but I just heard yesterday from a guy, I don't even know where he's from, some email, and he said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that I've been using your quiet time for years. I didn't play for you. I don't even know you, but thanks for that, because it helps me begin my day." So if we can help one person or two or five, it's a good thing.
No, that's an amazing thing to be able to reach people even outside of your circle of influence that you directly connect with. And I think there's some value too, because I agree with, when you're a college athlete or a college coach, there's so much pressure to perform and to compete on a regular basis that we get lost sometimes in those struggles. And that quiet time, it allows us to almost hit the reset button and appreciate where we're at, because to play at the next level is not something everyone gets to do. To be at that place is hard. So I love that idea of the gratitude and appreciation, because sometimes you forget just how special those moments are, because it's tough. There's definitely tough moments there. So
That's life. That's the
yeah.
thing. Beyond, our guys are only going to play so long. You only got to play so long. You had to move into the next phase. The next phase is no easier than the last phase. All of a sudden, you have a family. You said you have Charles, number 6, I think, right?
Yeah,
6th generation.
yeah. I'm pretty sure it's 6.
Yeah, and that's not easy. All of a sudden, that responsibility is bigger than, are you going to take 2 and hit to right, or whatever you had to do as a baseball player. And so I am a total believer in any day that I don't start my day in quiet time does not end up being as effective a day. It just, because sometimes, like any human, you say, "Oh, well, I got to get going. I got an early meeting. I've got to do this. I've got to do that." And you go into the day already a little bit distracted. And so I've found it really helps me anyway, to at least begin my day with that quiet time.
And it sounds like that was like a big piece of your culture that you were trying to build, is that there's appreciation in everything. There's focus on yourself as well as the team, and being present in the moment matters. So what I want to build off of there is, I feel like there's a lot of emphasis on building winning cultures, especially if you look at the college game and the pro game. But I feel like it gets lost a lot of time in the high school level. They talk about culture, but they don't spend enough time building the culture. When you were at YSU, when you were at OSU, how much time did you devote to building and growing the culture that you wanted within those places?
I think you'd be amazed at how much time we spend. In fact, I used to occasionally get a new assistant coach coming on the staff, and we would have the way we do things, and that coach maybe had never had that type of time breakdown, and they'd come into my office, "Coach, I need a little bit more meeting time. I need more film time. I need a little bit more practice time, whatever." And we're spending so much time on all this other stuff. I just, I'm struggling. And I said, "Well, hang in there. You need to experience this for a year. This is the way we have found that it's most effective. Not only do we believe that it helps us be a better team and the players better players, but we think it helps way beyond that, and that it will last a lot longer than any film meeting will, or anything like that. And ultimately, I never had a coach who, by the end of their first year, ever, came back to me and said, "Hey, we need more this time, that time. We got to stop doing some of these culture building, team building, life building activities." And now I talk to my players. I tell people all the time when they ask the question, "What was your greatest victory?" I always say, the greatest victory is when I hear from those players that they're using what they learned in their lives well into their personal and professional careers. That's a victory. And, I just had a surprise Zoom call with one of our former players, Steve Raring. He was hired to be on the pharmaceutical team with Bausch, pharmaceutical sales group. And so they were introducing him on a Zoom this week to the rest of the team. He had just been hired. And so they had me come on as a surprise guest. And it was interesting because, I don't get to talk to our guys all the time. I'm fortunate. I get to hear from them a lot, but not every day. And so I hadn't talked to Steve in a while. And he took the opportunity on that Zoom call with all of his new colleagues, to talk about things like quiet time and things like the things that we did outside of the game of football. And that's, to me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the culture piece lives long beyond the playing days. Cause like you said, we only play for so long, but you can make an impact well beyond that time. If you become a well-rounded person, you develop those pieces, and that's
culture. One of the scary things, Charles, about the evolution that I've watched. This is my 46th or 47th year in higher education. And obviously much of it was in athletics. And when I began, I don't ever remember much discussion about focus on, well, I'm going to do this to get a scholarship, or I'm going to play this sport so that someday I can make a lot of money or become famous or any of that. It was really primarily about the values that you gained from group activities, whether it's baseball, football, marching band, chemistry club, Baja car competition. The reason I throw that out is we just placed 13th in the country in our Baja here at YSU, and number 1 in the state. We beat Ohio State, we beat Case, we beat all the hotshot engineering schools, but what those guys are gaining from that, they're not going to become famous. They're not going to make lots of money on that, but the value that they'll gain from competing and building that team and those kinds of things, so valuable. And sometimes I worry that it's become about what you can gain from it materially as opposed to, personally. And, we've got to make sure we have podcasts like this, and we have discussions, and we have great teaching and mentoring and parenting and all those things, so that we can help people really grow in the areas that will have the most value.
I would agree with you there. I think that there's a lot of focus nowadays on individual achievements and the scholarship chasing and the making it to the next level. But the odds of making it all the way to the top and making the millions and millions of dollars is slim. But
Sure.
You're going to have a life after sport. That's a guarantee. If you make it to that point in your life, you're going to have to do something with it. So why not focus on, like you said, becoming a leader, working with people, showing yourself as a communicator amongst your peers, because the communication skills go way down because of all the technology nowadays. We don't communicate as well. We don't lead people well. And there's not an emphasis on, like you said, the teamwork and the development of just being well-rounded as a human. It's all about chasing that end game of making money or earning a scholarship. And
yeah, it's interesting, Charles. We have a great donor here in the Valley, great really story. It's a guy named Shorty Navarro, and Shorty Navarro came to America from Puerto Rico with 25 cents in his pocket. Started working at a gas station, went and served the country, came back, went to work back at this gas station, ended up buying the gas station, ended up anyway with dozens of car dealerships and became a millionaire. And he always, I love it when I hear him talk to our students, because he says, chasing the almighty dollar is fine. I didn't sign a vow of poverty. People, need to make a living. He said, but you know what? You can only eat so many steaks, but you can make a difference in people's lives. And that's what really he has an appetite for. He's just one of those special people that we may never hear his name as to what he does for everyone. The impact he's made is way beyond the dollars and cents that he earned.
Yeah, no, I love stories like that, because I think that's true, is the impact you make on others is what lives long beyond the money you earn. And so what I want to get into a little bit with this is, what would you give as far as advice to the coaches out there that are working with the high school and middle school aged kids, as far as balancing that time? Because obviously at that age, you don't get a lot of time to practice. And so that's why I think a lot of times the culture and the development of overall well-rounded skills kind of gets put to the side. What would you give to them as far as advice to help them understand that growth prospect for their children and their kids they're working with, and still getting enough time to get the skill work in? How would you give that message to them?
One of the things that I believe is that we don't spend enough time training people who will be having that opportunity to impact others. In fact, I was with a group and we were talking about, what can we do about youth sports? Because youth sports, the participation after age 13 right now just nosedives. And in part because leading up to that time, it's all about, do I make the travel team? Do I make the all-star team? Am I going to get a trophy? Am I going to get recruited to play at a, top team, whatever. And 75% of all youth coaches haven't been trained beyond their high school education. Well, you need to be educated to be able to work with people and make a difference. I was an education major. That's what I was trained. I learned how to educate. The majority of our youth coaches, even some of our high school coaches, haven't been trained. And so I guess if I were talking with a youth coach, I would say you've got to find a way to get some training. And the beauty of today is you can go on the internet, you can go to podcasts, you can go. There's so much information out there if you're willing to go and even self-train, so that you can then have the right balance of, yes, you need to teach people how to bunt and cover first base and throw the football and block and tackle and, whatever. But if you'll just spend a solid amount of time in the things that can add value to the participant beyond the sport, you'll do better in the sport. Now, what's difficult is in today's world where all they want to talk about is the first place team or team that's winning every game or that has the best player who's getting recruited to go to college or whatever, that becomes how you're evaluated. So most humans want to be evaluated well. And so all of a sudden, it becomes about how many games do you win and all that. And we knew we had to win games to stay employed, but also just because we were competitive. We wanted to win games, and so it really takes a lot of discipline to utilize whatever time it is you have to not just teach the fundamentals of the sport, but to teach the fundamentals that will help people in life.
No, I agree. I think there's a lot of difficulty nowadays to win because, and for whatever reason, it's earlier and earlier. There's we won the 10U championship.
Yeah.
I don't remember my record up until high school.
Right.
And I probably couldn't even tell you my record. Actually, I couldn't tell you my record then. I just knew we were competitive and we went out and we competed and we played hard, and on any given day, I think we could win. But it's interesting today how often we see posts of, we won the 12U championship or the 10U championship, or my team is from Ohio going to Florida to play in some national tournament. And that's great and all. I mean, that's cool to get that exposure and that's fun for the kids if it's done right. But like you said, we see a huge dip at 13 in the participation. And as a coach, I want that to be the opposite direction. I want to see people stick around and then maybe see a 25% drop off because they have other activities they're choosing to do, not because they don't want to play anymore, but they found a passion somewhere else. But we're pushing kids to be on these elite teams so much that by the time they get to middle school, high school, they don't play for fun anymore. If you're not,
Well, we've done quite a job of making people immerse themselves solely in their sport. You know, you see kids now, how many kids are playing multiple sports? How many kids are involved in other school activities other than their sport? I find it interesting here on campus. We have the second largest public school athletic department in the state of Ohio. We have 465 student athletes. And what I find interesting is it's hard for our student athletes to have the time to get an internship, to study abroad, to get involved on campus in other student activities, because the time demand on their sport is so high. And it concerns me a little bit that, we've just, I'm afraid, gone a little bit overboard with wanting to be a great softball player. And our softball team, we won the regular season. We were good, and we've got a wonderful program and so forth. But have our softball players been involved in as many other things as they could that would help shape them? Because there's not a professional softball league, or there used to be, I guess, with 4 teams in the whole country.
right.
So there's not many people going to be doing that. And, so it's an ongoing discussion I think we need to continue to have.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because you want to be competitive, you want to win games. But like you said, at the end of the day, especially for a sport like softball, the odds of playing after college is very small. I mean, I think there's the Olympic team and maybe a couple professional teams. I don't even know if they are anymore, but
Right.
that's not something that's going to be for everybody. But you're all going to go find jobs after. And if you don't have that community skill or the outreach, or just, even don't volunteering your time at something in the city, those types of things go well beyond the playing and the winning.
And if we do a good job coaching, we can really give them some skills that will help them in all those things they're ultimately going to end up doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that to me, the value of sport. I don't know if it's discussed as much as the, $1 million contracts and the scholarships and the trophies and whatnot. But, it is what it is. And we've got to do a better job of training one another. And that's why people that are curious to improve, you can listen to this podcast, and, it's not, you might not be a baseball coach or a football coach or whatever, but maybe you can utilize it with your sales team or your family or your nonprofit organization or whatever. And to me, that's the value of having discussions like this.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that was my aim for this, is that, the percentage of people that I'm going to touch in my life that go on to play professionally and make millions of dollars is going to be 0.0001%.
Right.
But the people that are going to go on and have families and try to have a real career and a job and have to lead other people, it's going to be relatively high, in my opinion. So that's where these values and these lessons can grow. So what I want to dig into now is, I think of you as a fantastic leader. I think everywhere you've gone, you've done a great job of impacting the cultures around you, whether it's in the president's position or a leadership position at Akron or as a football coach. What I want to know is that I see a lot of these leaders, and they present this confidence and this ability to know, like, I know this is how I'm going to do it. And they show this strength behind their leadership approach. Can you think of a time when you doubted your leadership abilities?
I remember when I left here as the head coach and went to Ohio State, I had and still have the same, a great mentor. His name is Dr. Pat Spurgeon. He's a retired English professor from Georgia Southern, and we connected in 1991 and have remained very close since. And I remember when we left here, he said to me, there's going to be a moment in time where you're sitting in that big office at Ohio State, and you're going to question, can I do this? And he said, at that moment, you have to remind yourself that you can, because you can. But you can't let that seed of doubt creep in there. And I thought, well, okay, that's good advice. And so I was there about 2 months, and we had just had a whirlwind recruiting. We were only there the last 2 weeks of recruiting, and then I had to get to know all the players. And here I was coming from 1AA, and I had to develop those relationships where they would have confidence in what we were going to do. Our program was very different. The way it was constricted, it was just different than what they'd had. And so after about 2 months, I was sitting in the office late one night, and I was thinking, gosh, I don't know if this is clicking, connecting. Am I the right person for this moment, this place? And then right when that seed of doubt entered my mind, I remembered Doc Spurgeon's comment. And he said, his voice in my mind said, hey, you're going to have this moment, and you're going to have to talk down that doubt. And I think without question, we all do. When I came here as a president, I'd never been a president. I'd only been a vice president for 2 years, and now I'm going to be the president. And, it's such a grander scale than being a coach. As a coach, I had 100 guys and 12 coaches, and now I've got 2,000 employees and 12,000 students and 6 different academic colleges. And I don't know as much about those as I do about offense, defense, and special teams. I felt there was really 2 things I had to do to not have a false confidence. I mean, it's easy to say, I can do this, but how do you, make sure that that's true? And so one was, I wanted to study and study and study and study the world that I was in. And I was very fortunate that I got to spend 2 years at the University of Akron as a vice president. And I just went to school on higher ed and administration and tried to learn as much as I could about every facet. And that hasn't ended. The curiosity you need for knowledge is never ending. And so I felt like I had to do that. And then the second thing I felt like I had to do, whether it was when I took over as the head coach at Youngstown State, took over at Ohio State, came here as the head coach, if you will, is that I had to listen to the people who were living it. I had to hear from them. I had to know what they're thinking. We have a little acronym we call WAYT. And that means, what are you thinking? And I kept reminding our coaches and my administrative staff and so forth. It's important to know what people are thinking, because you can learn a lot from them because they're living it. They've been here longer than you. I had deans who had been here 20 years. I had faculty that had been here a long time. I had students who were in their 3rd or 4th year. They'd been here longer than I had. I needed to know what they were thinking. I have a group called my presidential mentors, and there's about 20, 25 students from broad backgrounds, broad majors, belief systems, preferences, ideologies, whatever. And we sit and I pick their brain constantly. I want to know what they're thinking. I want to know what they would do. And I always have said that when you're trying to learn the people you're trying to serve, if you're constantly probing and asking questions and wanting to learn from them, 2 things can happen if you ask them what they're thinking. And that is, you can come up with some great ideas. When I first got here to Youngstown State, I sat with my presidential mentors. I said, okay, you guys, what would you do first? What's the first thing we need here at Youngstown State to get better? Having no idea what the heck they'd say. And I was amazed. Their consensus was, you know what? We need to fix the streets. I said, fix the streets? He said, yeah, we have a beautiful campus. But the entry-level streets, the potholes, they don't look good. They got wires hanging down. It's not as good looking as the campus. And so first impressions are everything. When you drive into class, if you're a commuter, you want to feel good about what you're driving into. When you're visiting the campus to see if maybe you'd like to go to school there, or if you're a faculty member thinking about, do I want to come to work there? You want to feel good about it. He said, I would fix the streets first. I said, wow, that's a great idea. So that's what we did. And Wick Avenue, which is our main east side street, now is a gorgeous entree. Fifth Avenue, we're just finishing this year. It's taken us a long time. We got a big federal grant, and it's going to be gorgeous. It's going to change the whole, that sides, Lincoln Avenue, all those. we wanted that to be nice. But had I not asked the question, I would have had no idea that that was that important to them. The second thing that can happen if you ask someone what they're thinking is you can maybe clarify a misconception they have. It's like, let's take baseball or football. When our student athletes, we always talk to them about strength training and nutrition and those kinds of things, because there's so much information out there. Everyone thinks they're an expert in those areas. What do you think we ought to be doing? Why? And then they might have an idea that really isn't founded in good data, good science. And you might be able to clarify the thinking they have. And then they say, oh, okay, now I know why we're doing this. And now they'll buy in. But as you know, you go back to the dorm as players, you always sit around talking, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Why am I taking this calculus? What's this have to do with engineering? I want to get in, I want to get my hands on things. And, if you can tell them, well, here's why we're doing this. Here's the science behind it. Here's the data behind it. Here's the experiences. Here's the people who have become successful at what you want to be successful at. Well, here's what they've done. That's why we do that. And so those are the two things, I think that are really important is you've got to study and learn, and you got to find out from others what they know. And then if you can take both of those things into how you want to approach things, I think you have a chance to improve both the culture and also the execution of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that, because I think so often nowadays we want to hear ourselves talk. So we want to come in and want to start giving commands and directions right out the gate without really knowing what we're giving directions to or why we're giving those directions. And I love the idea that they came and said the streets, because I actually came back to campus. It was a few years ago now. One of my teammates was getting inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame. And I think the campus looks gorgeous. The addition of the inside facility, the Watts, and then the off-campus living apartments in the bookstore, which wasn't there when I was there. It really makes the place shine. And then the softball facility is right there next to the football field now. And it just really ties it all together. But it made for a very welcoming drive back in to a place that I hadn't been in a long time. And I love,
Charles, you were here.
Brandon Capon was inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame. And I want to say it was 2 or 3 football seasons ago, because they do it during the football season.
You wouldn't recognize the place now.
I imagine. Yeah.
It's so much fun. You'll have to get back over here. But that was important. Second thing that presidential mentors told me is we need better places to live. That's why we've built 1,000 new apartments and places they're living in. Heck, I told Ellen, we ought to move into one of those. That's nicer than living in the Pollock house here on campus. But those things are important, but that's what's important about working with people, finding out what's important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes as leaders, we come in and say, okay, we've got all this infinite wisdom. We've been waiting for this chance to have this position. Now we're going to tell everyone what they should want.
Yeah.
You have to find out what they want.
Yeah. And the value of asking the right question and the value of listening and actually paying attention to what they're saying goes well beyond the knowledge that you have that you're bringing to the table, because now you can direct that knowledge in the right way. So
most important part of communication, listening.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. So what I want to go now is I think there's some other things that we can go into here from the leadership side, because I think in life as well as sport, there's going to be a time when we face adversity. Adversity is a huge piece of growing and leading and being able to come back from tough stuff. And for me, I want to know a little bit about, there's 2 times in your career where I think that you were faced with some adversity and you did an amazing job of making the team understand that it was just a small part of the process. At least that's my belief, because you bounced back so quickly. But 1995, you were just coming off of a national championship run and your team came out and you had a rough year going 3-8. But then 2 years later, you found yourself back in the national championship game and you won another title. Similar situation occurred at Ohio State, 2004, 2 years after your national title run. The team went 8-4, which isn't a bad season by any means, but obviously at OSU, that's considered a bad season. It was 5th in the Big Ten. You still won your bowl game. But after that season, you had 6 straight huge seasons, competing for the Big Ten title, finding your way back to 2 national titles, opportunities. What did you do in those situations where you were faced with a moment that could be a wrong turn? And how did you right the ship and allow those players to know that, look, we're going to grow from this and become stronger and come back and be great again?
I think there are two critical things that have to occur. The first one is you have to look in the mirror and you have to evaluate what we could have done better as leaders. That's the start. A lot of times I see in sport, I hear coaches say, well, we need better players. Well, that has nothing to do with what you're doing. Okay. So looking in the mirror, let's take that 95 example you had. Okay. So not only were we coming off of a national championship, we were coming off 4 straight years in the national championship game,
Right.
winning 3 of them. Okay. So then all of a sudden we're 3-8. So what didn't we do? And so we did an autopsy of ourselves first. And what we found was really interesting. We went back to the most minute details. We took every practice schedule and we said, okay, maybe we've done something different in our preparation. And so what was really interesting is what we learned was 1991, 2, 3, 4, played 15 games each year. So we played 60 games.
Wow.
And what we saw was throughout those 60 games, those preparations, is our amount of time we spent in what we call individual period, which is not working with 7-on-7 or team or whatever. But you're just working on your fundamental skills. We allowed ourselves to creep backwards to how much time we spent on fundamentals. Well, we got away with it because we had veterans and we had success and it was rolling and so forth. Well, after 94, we lost 26 seniors. And then we lost one player. If you remember in 95, that was a strike year in the major leagues.
Yeah.
And we lost a player prior to preseason who went to become a scab player during the major league deal. So we lost 26 guys that were really good, guys that we had probably 4 or 5 that played 58 out of those 68 games and were all Americans and this and that. Well, maybe they didn't need quite as much fundamental, but the younger guys did. And so first thing we did is we went back and we said, hey, starting in 96, we're going back to our fundamentals better. And slowly improved to a year after that. We were back to the top of the mountain. That was critical. The other critical part was asking our players what it was they thought we needed to do to get back to the top of the mountain. Again, we couldn't come out and we could do our autopsy, figure out what we could do better. We could then execute that, but it couldn't stop there. We had to have them look in the mirror and say, okay, what is it we need to do? What ideas do you have? That goes back to your WAYT. What do you think? We need to know what they were thinking. Why do they think it happened? No. And very similar, in 2004, we were coming off 2 really good years. We won the championship in 2002, and then we could have gone back to the national championship game in 2003, and then we had our 1 loss to Michigan. And so we start 2004, and we're a younger team. And we start out 3-0. And I remember thinking to myself, man, we are not a 3-0 type team. I mean, we're not as good, but we'd come off these great seasons. And so they thought, okay, here we go. We're going to have all these great teams. And we lose 3 straight games. And now we're 3-3. And it was one of those seminal moments where we had to look in the mirror and say, okay, what do we have to do differently as coaches? And we need to have our team look in the mirror and say, what do they need to do differently? And what do they think we should be doing? We needed their input. We wanted their ownership. And then after that, 3-3, and then the following game, I think we won 5 of the last 6 that year. Upset Michigan. They were really a good team, and we beat them and then had a good bowl game. And then really 05, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we were Big Ten champs or co-champs, one or the other right after that. But we kept going back to making sure we were evaluating ourselves as coaches. What can we do better? And not assuming that it's, the minute you start blaming the performers, I think as a leader, you're going to head the wrong direction. And so I thought our staff did a great job of both figuring out how they could be better and also getting input from the team to get the ownership as to what they needed to do to get better and what ideas they had for us to integrate into what we were doing. So those were really two critical times. Ultimately, though, you have to believe that you can. And so I don't know that we ever lost our belief. We just kind of maybe lost our way.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we still had the belief in one another.
No, that's awesome. And I love how you were able to push more or less the pause button to stop the momentum from going the wrong direction and to change it. Because I think that's the other thing too, is a lot of coaches, they get sucked up in the moment. They get anxious, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh my gosh, we got to win. But they don't take that time to slow down and go, okay, let's reevaluate. Let's ask some questions. Let's see where we can change and get this back on track before the wheels come off and we find ourselves rolling down the hill.
That momentum in a season is really hard. And I think it comes from a little bit when you hit those tough moments, all of a sudden the finger pointing begins. And in a situation like Youngstown State, who had just been to 4 straight national championships and were used to a lot of notoriety, and then it starts going the other way. If the fingers pointing starts happening, you're not going to get back anytime soon. And at Ohio State, when all of a sudden, with the amount of media coverage we had, and we didn't withhold our guys from being with the media, and some of them at times would make a mistake and point a finger here or there. But the momentum halting can't happen if you allow the finger pointing to begin.
Yeah, no, I agree. So what I want to end with here today, I have one more question for you, and then I'll let you go because I don't want to take too much of your time. But I recently heard you give a speech where you were talking about how you hope to see the OSU-Michigan rivalry get to a 500 or better record. What I want to know is, when you first started at OSU, the record was 56, 35, and 6. It's currently now 58, 51, and 6. What thoughts and emotions come to mind when you look at what's happened over the last 19 years, going 16-2, to make it possible today to see that rivalry get to an even position? Because I believe personally that without you changing the culture of how we looked at that game and how we approach that game, we may not be able to see that 500 record even get close, because they had a huge lead. They seem to have all the momentum. But again, you came in, you made some changes, and you did something special that's now carrying into an opportunity where Coach Day can potentially even it up. So what do you feel when you hear something like that?
I think you have to be realistic and humble enough to understand that there were a lot of things that happened before we got there.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like to point to 3 turning points in the rivalry. One happened way back in 1941 when Paul Brown was hired as the coach at Ohio State. He was an Ohio high school coach. And that began the move toward being able to recruit many of the best players, most of the best players from Ohio. Prior to 1941, and I don't know what our win-loss record leading up to 41 was against Michigan, but it
wasn't good.
Bad. It was bad. He started that going. Now, obviously, when Woody was there that long time, it was a battle. He had the 10-year war with Bo, and I think he was like 16-11 or something, but he got at least moving in the right direction. The second thing that happened that I think was pivotal was when Andy Geiger came to Ohio State in 1993 or so, and he came from Stanford, and he convinced the people in Columbus and at Ohio State is that they didn't even know how good they could be, but they better get their facilities caught up. Ohio Stadium was a little tired, a little old. We didn't have a great training facility. We had a lot of sports and they were kind of crammed together and it wasn't a good setting. And so when he came, he really spearheaded about $200 and some million renovation of Ohio Stadium, made it the greatest stadium in the country. That's a big start. He built the Jesse Owens track, the Bill Davis baseball, the Steelwood gymnastics, the boathouse out on Scioto River, and all of a sudden, a few years later, we become national champions in rowing. $35 million improvement to the Woody Hayes Center. So from about 93 to 2004, the facilities at Ohio State became better than anywhere in the country. I think that was pivotal. And then the third pivotal and final pivotal, in my mind, that gave us a chance to really get on a roll was beginning with the 2002 recruiting class. The best players stayed in Ohio.
Yeah.
And it used to be, if you look back in history, that the captains and the All-Americans at Michigan were Ohio guys. And so when that stopped, and it fortunately has continued to be stopped now for about 18 or 19 years, when you have people who it's important to them because that's their state, and Ryan and Urban did a great job recruiting out of state too, but they kept the door closed from Michigan taking, the difference makers, up there. And so if you add all those things together, I think that's given us a chance. Now, 58 and 51, is that what you said it is now?
58, 51, and 6. Yep, we're
Okay,
right there.
So 7, to make up 7 years isn't a layup.
No,
Because Michigan should be good. I mean, they have no reason not to be. But we have a chance. And so that's why I made that comment when Ryan and I were together at an event here in Youngstown, and we were just having some fun. And so I said, I've got one goal left in mind, and that's to be able to see that day.
yeah, no, I think that's fun. I think that's a cool way to get them fired up to keep moving the needle. Because like you said, it could take a while. I mean, it's a bitter rivalry. It's always hard fought, and it's not necessarily going to be something that's going to easily happen. But hopefully, like you said, we keep the in-state guys here and we keep pushing that ball and we find our way to that 500 record, because I think that would be a neat thing to see myself. So what I want to leave people with is there any way for the listeners that are paying attention here to connect with what you're doing next, what you got going on, follow kind of where you're at and what's happening? Is there anything you want to leave them as far as a way to kind of see where you're going next?
Well, I would assume most of the listeners are people who are fond of the state of Ohio, and we take great pride in being one of the outstanding 14 four-year public universities in the state. And the better we all get, the better our state will be. We need to have innovators, entrepreneurs, inventors, to make a difference. We need to create a great workforce. We need to create good citizens. And so keeping an eye on what's going on at Youngstown State, you can log on to our Twitter or website or whatever you want to keeping an eye on what all the other 13 universities are doing. We're in this together. You always want the place you live to be the best place there is. And, so we're trying to do our part.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Coach Tressel, for joining me today and taking some of your time to share your knowledge and wisdom and your experiences from over the years. I hope it goes a long way to helping some of these younger coaches and players grow and develop. It's been an honor. As always, guys, keep reaching for the stars, fall flat on your face. But remember, whenever we fall, always get up.
Thank you for joining us today on the Edge of Greatness podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and join us again next time as we continue to dig deeper into the key components of greatness. The path to greatness is never linear, so remember to keep pursuing greatness no matter what. Keep stretching your abilities, reach for the stars, and fall flat on your face. But no matter what happens, remember, whenever we fall, always get up. Until next time, I'm Charles Schultz, and this was the Edge of Greatness podcast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Please take a moment now to subscribe, rate, and review our show. We are all on the edge of greatness.